Right, this is another classic sci-fi from 1966 by, how do you pronounce that name? Budrys? Algis Budrys? Not sure. American science fiction writer. This one's from 1966. He wrote top-notch stories. I don't know of any of his that I haven't enjoyed, but he wrote, I think, mostly short stories, and so I haven't read that many of him recently. I'm always going to recognize the author's name with enthusiasm, though, and I think I've only got a couple on my shelf. So I was delighted to find this in a second-hand bookshop here on the coast that was closing down. This book follows a few themes that Budrys likes. He likes depicting isolated locations and damaged people. And our isolated location is a very arid country. It's basically a desert. And we see this world wholly through the eyes of our main character, who starts off as Honor White Jackson. He's part of a clan where the colour depicts the status of the individual. So Honor White Jackson kills people and then becomes Honor Black Jackson and later Honor Red Jackson. He's young, he's a teenager. He's trained his whole life to go out into the desert and kill the animals called the Amseer, which are ferocious fighters, and they've got wings. And the desert's a dangerous place because people colonize around a narrow band around a central, what do they call it? It's a tower of metal pointing at the sky that to us is quite clearly a spaceship that can no longer go into space, but they don't know it. So because we see things from inside Honor Jackson's mind, and he doesn't know very much, and he isn't interested in very much, we see this world. We fill in the edges of it in ways that he knows nothing about, though we still know the things that he knows about it. So he sneaks off into the desert to make his first kill. And we find out that humans can't actually go very far outside a certain boundary because they can no longer breathe. The air seems to be in some way connected to the spaceship. We don't get an explanation for that until much later in the book. Honor Jackson, of course, accepts his world as he accepts it. And he gets out there and he starts hunting an Amseer who is clearly still hunting him. And during the final battle, the final killing battle, Honor's world is shaken when the Amseer talks to him. So it's clearly not the animal that he's been brought up to believe. One of the secrets that the actual fighters know is clearly that the Amseers talk. And there is a disintegration of his world at this point when he realizes that everyone was lying to him. Now, Amseer was almost clearly a psychopath in his own way, in that his emotive connections to things weren't really high. He has brothers, he has Confederates, he isn't strongly connected to anyone but himself, and his main goals all revolved around himself. So he's curious and he wants to know more. And eventually he does. So the isolated and the damaged people, which the author likes, are covered there. I think it's a bit narrow to describe it as damaged. I suppose any person who lives in a constrictive society is in some way damaged. And I'm sure all of us are. It's just a question of looking at our society and what the damages it's done to us are. And if you look at more constrictive societies, if you look at cults, for example, and you go, wow, they completely damaged their people, we can feel very superior about that. But should we really? People don't always know their damage. And as long as you're in a society where you are privileged and you are given the social reinforcement in your viewpoint, how are you to know any more than Honor White Jackson knows that he is damaged in a society that is completely and utterly inhumane and is lying to him? And this is one of the things I love about science fiction and speculative fiction. From the get-go, they make you question not only the book, but they make you question you and the world around you. And that's one of the most marvellous things about it. So I don't think you can really spoil a book that was published in 66, but if you feel that I could, go away, read it, and come back. Eventually, Honor Jackson, I think he's Honor Red Jackson by that stage, heads off into the desert using a number of mechanisms that he knows are very dangerous and he'll probably die. He doesn't think much about that. He doesn't think an awful lot, does Honor Jackson. And he eventually winds up with an Amseer and offers to become a captive. So the Amseer takes him to their colony. And you find that the reason why the Amseer, who didn't really have to keep coming after the humans, is because their central spike, their spaceship, is one that they can't get into, and they think a human might be able to. So they keep sending champions out in the desert to try and get a human who will come back and try and get into the spaceship. It is a wild scenario. And I think Jackson's final conclusion is that when people landed, they diverged in a number of ways, and that they are basically all people, but Honor Jackson himself is most close to the prototype, so he does eventually get into that spaceship, at which point he gets a huge learning curve, and the whole world and story concludes on a very exciting level, which I'm not going to talk about. But I do think that if you like classic science fiction, you should read it. If you feel... Actually, no, I can't think of anything about this that has dated so badly that it should upset many people. There aren't many female characters in it. If you are someone who needs to have a woman character in there, this one might not be for you, because I don't think there are any at all, actually. But in terms of a really excellent classic sci-fi, it's a little beauty, and you should probably read it. If you have read it, tell me what you think about it.